Tree huggers get a bad rap sometimes. The phrase is used dismissively. They're just a bunch of tree huggers. But it can be quite serious business. Consider the Chipko movement of northern India. Rural people, drawing on the Gandhian philosophy of peaceful resistance, put themselves between woodcutters and the trees in order to protect the forests from destruction. These people, most often women, loved the land so much that they risked their lives. Hugging trees is what the movement is named for. Chipko means embrace, and it was a matter of survival to villagers whose way of life depended on preserving the ecological balance. They knew the land loved them and provided for them. They knew that trees are not optional. Consider another tree-loving woman, Wangari Maathai. As a young girl in the highlands of Kenya, Wangari loved the hills dotted with fig trees, the streams full of fish, and the plentiful gardens of the people. But after she went away to college in America and then returned home to Kenya, her homeland had been transformed. More and more land had been cleared, the trees were gone, the gardens dried up, and the people were malnourished. She set out to change that with a tree planting program that evolved into the Green Belt movement. It has planted over 51 million trees with profound effects on the human and ecological communities. Maathai won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2004 for her efforts. She explains, when we plant trees, we plant the seeds of peace and hope. Wangari Maathai knew that love of the land was a mutual affair, just as good for people as it is for trees. I must admit, if you hadn't already guessed it, that I am among the tree lovers. I've planted a few trees in my life and hugged some too. Surely some of my ancestors from the British Isles must have been Druids. During my 20 years in Indiana, I came to know the silvery sycamore with its sloppy leaves that grows along the waterways, the sugar maples that turn brilliant shades of crimson in the fall, the tulip poplars with their large, tulip-shaped leaves and exotic orange and yellow flowers. My favorite time of year was that brief period in spring when the dogwoods are covered with delicate white or pink blossoms and tiny, brilliant lavender flowers emerge from the branches of redbuds. Glorious. I loved that land, and it loved me back. During my brief sojourn in Northern California, of course, I had to get out among the redwoods. Redwoods are amazing. This ancient species traces back to the Jurassic period, think dinosaurs, and a redwood can live over 2,000 years. So there are trees alive today that first sprouted during the Roman Empire. Redwoods are also the tallest living things on the planet and can grow as tall as skyscrapers. The tallest redwood yet discovered by humans reaches the equivalent of 35 stories. And redwoods contain whole ecosystems, birds and animals, as well as other plants. Needles fall into the knotholes and turn into soil, nourishing ferns, mosses, bushes, and even other trees that grow among the canopy of the redwoods. Besides which, they are elegant to behold, creating a sacred hush despite all the life thriving among them. A redwood grove is like a cathedral made by nature. Can you blame me for being smitten with the redwood? So when I was in search for a congregation to serve, and my family came up with our set of criteria of what we were looking for in a new geographic location, guess what was on my list? Trees. Real trees. Before we had spent much time here, I was a bit nervous, actually, about whether North Texas would have enough real trees for me. Not just the scrubby things that you find in arid places, but tall, spreading green canopies. One of the members of the ministerial search committee picked up on this during the pre-candidating weekend. I think it was around the time that I was invited to be your candidate, and maybe before I had answered, that I received an email with a picture. The search committee member had gone for a hike at the Fort Worth Nature Preserve. The picture in my inbox, taken from a high vantage point, showed rolling waves of green treetops stretching as far as the camera eye could see. Real forest, real trees. I had done enough online research to know that Tarrant County was part of the Cross Timbers bioregion, with not only prairies, but woods full of various oaks, hickories, Osage orange, cedar elms, hawthorns, and sumacs. Still, it helped to see it with my own eyes. Here in this panorama of green was visceral reassurance that yes, I could love this land, and it would love me back. Essayist Scott Russell Sanders describes rooting in place, getting to know the land you live on, as part of the prescription for healing the damage that our species and our consumerist North American culture has done to the earth. In his book titled Staying Put, Sanders writes that strength comes, healing comes, from aligning yourself with the grain of your place and answering to its needs. He quotes Thoreau, who said, "The one who is often thinking that it is better to be somewhere else than where they are excommunicates themselves." Sanders observes, "The metaphor is religious. To withhold yourself from where you are is to be cut off from communion with the source. It has taken me half of a lifetime of searching," Sanders says, "to realize that the likeliest path to the ultimate ground leads through my local ground. I mean the land itself, with its creeks and rivers, its weather, seasons, stone outcroppings, and all the plants and animals that share it. I cannot have a spiritual center without having a geographical one. I cannot live a grounded life without being grounded in a place." Now, I don't know about you, but this rings true in my experience. I consider my walks out in the woods as much a necessity in my life and a spiritual practice as my morning meditation. That sense of connection to the land helps me get out of my head and into my body, and to feel that my body, myself, does not end at my skin, but extends out through the great oaks and the burbling creek and the expansive Texas sky. Perhaps you got a little sense of that looking at some of the pictures from my walks during the interlude. Scott Russell Sanders describes something like this in Staying Put, too. "In belonging to a landscape," he writes, "one feels a rightness, at-homeness, a knitting of self and world. This condition of clarity and focus, this being fully present, is akin to what Buddhists call mindfulness, what Christian contemplatives refer to as recollection, what Quakers call centering down. I am suspicious of any philosophy that would separate this worldly from otherworldly commitment," he says. "There's only one world, and we participate in it here and now, in our flesh and our place." Kind of sounds like a Unitarian Universalist, doesn't he? I think he grew up Quaker, but he actually belongs now to my UU home congregation in Indiana, so there you go. So as long as I'm bearing my Druidish soul this morning, I'm going to share one more thing from my inner world. I have a recurring fantasy of returning to a way of life that is close to the earth, living in harmony with natural cycles, living sustainably, being deeply rooted in community as well as place. Sometimes the thirst for this more connected way of living comes over me when I am out in the woods or poking around in a creek bed. And I don't really want to go back to my car or my computer. I don't want to be spending so many hours inside that I have to check my phone to find out the temperature and whether it's sunny or cloudy. I dream of spending my days picking berries, catching fish, weaving baskets, watching my child play near a tree, cooperating with others of my tribe to meet the essentials of life, and to enjoy drumming, dancing, chanting, art, and ceremony too. What prompts this fantasy for me is not a sense of doom about the future as global climate change continues. It doesn't come from guilt or depression about what we've done to the planet and what we're leaving our future generations. It comes simply from my love of the land and my desire to remain grounded in this basic truth that I am part of all that is. The land, the food chain, the bioregion, the continually mixing and changing streams of human culture. It comes from love of the land and a primordial longing for that connection. I was intrigued several years ago to discover that an artist whose work I love, Michael Green, has created an installation, a traveling exhibit, about what he calls the North American afterculture. Here's one of the images titled Emergence Mother, or Gaia Mama. Green explains the afterculture project. For the vast spread of our time on Earth, he says, traditional tribal life patterns have successfully maintained ecological and spiritual balance, and we must now turn to them for guidance if we are to escape our present crisis. A worthy tribal culture of the future would not be a simple return to archaic practices, but would be an evolutionary synthesis of old and new. Imagine a people grounded in traditional life patterns who gracefully incorporate the useful scientific knowledge and global spiritual understandings of our time. To be truly sustainable, they would by necessity have a radically simplified lifestyle. Now, don't get me wrong, it's hard to envision living in Texas without some form of air conditioning. But maybe we can power it with wind and solar instead of the fossil fuels that are fueling our runaway climate change. I don't know what the solutions are, but I think regular people like us can embrace an attitude of experimentation. We can get connected or stay connected to the places that we live so that we can respond with adaptations of culture and technology that make sense right where we are. I can think of no better way to love the land and give it a chance to keep loving us back. I find tremendous hope in this idea of an afterculture and the realization that we who are living right here, right now, can be part of that positive evolution. It may seem like what we do will be small, too small, but then remember the lesson of the seed. Every great tree starts from a tiny seed, even a giant redwood. The seeds we plant today matter, and it is not too late to heed the words that I shared with the children from Chief Yellowlark. Once more, Great Spirit, let me walk in beauty, and let my eyes ever behold the red and purple sunset. Make my hands respect the things you have made, and my ears grow sharp to hear your voice. Make me wise, that I may understand the things you have taught my people. Let me learn the lessons you have hidden in every leaf and rock. May we all continue to cherish and nurture our relationship with the land. Amen.